Okay, got that. Had to bring it up to check because they took off the record icon. Anyway, good evening. This is the Chicago Computer Society July Linux SIG meeting. And tonight we're going to have a little bit of fun, and I hope it's somewhat educational. Before I start, does anybody have anything else they want to bring up to the group?
So, Tim, I was curious about your comment on recording. Are you recording besides using Zoom?
I have Zoom, and I normally record with OBS Studio, but
okay.
Latest versions have had some bugs in it, and I for the month of July I've been struggling. Not a joke, and I'm about ready to hang them. All right, let's see what damage we can do. Since I didn't hear anything that you guys wanted to bring up. So now that one's got to go to sleep.
Tim, I presume we'll be covering the new version of Mint.
No.
No. Okay.
No. I don't feel like it.
All right. I'll figure it out for myself.
No, I've got information regarding it. So, in a matter of speaking, you got to hold on to your shorts. Okay. What am I doing? I hate this. I got 4 machines, and I'm using KVMs on pairs. And I keep forgetting I'm using the right mouse, but I'm not using the right keyboard. Drives me nuts. Now this takes a little bit of time for it to populate everything. Come on. There we go. Starting to get there. Okay, since you brought it up, last week late, they came up with a new release. It's a normal release. Normally, each major distribution has a 2-year life. Okay. And as such, during that 2-year period, for new people getting Mint, they have like .1, .2, .3, and then you get the next major version of Mint. That's how it works. Now, the current 21.2 is Victoria. It gives you here on this blog about it. Create a system snapshot is recommended because things do go wrong. Prepare for the upgrade, and it's basic steps. Changes in artwork are optional. Reboot the computer. Commonly asked questions. And then,
Tim, I don't think you're sharing. I just see a big Zoom screen and your cursor
Big
moving
white
around.
screen.
this thing took.
You're not in the correct tab.
No, what happened is it's doing the wrong screen. That sharing. Hang loose for 1 second.
Technology is great when it works.
Yeah, I know. No, for some reason, this thing is sharing the wrong screen. And I told it what screen I wanted, and it says top. I would have to say right now, there's a strong probability there's a bug in that Zoom version. And I'm not joking when I say that. Let's see what happens here. Okay.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, but it doesn't want to stop sharing either. Anyway, this basically goes through some of the steps. And as I said, there's a bunch of stuff, but here's the crux. You look through new features, important info, systems requirements, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't see something there that you really need, you don't need it. Not a joke. You can stay on any 21, which is 0.0, or 21.1 and skip this 21.2, which I'm thinking of skipping. Now, when 21.3 comes out, I'll evaluate that at the time, but who knows whether I'll upgrade to that one or not. It could be when they release 22.0. And it's their cycle. 21.1, 2, and 3 is like Earl is on a different version of the Linux. If he wanted to switch to Mint, that's perfectly fine. He would probably right now download 21.2, depending on where he got the ISO from. That's made for somebody that's never been on Linux or is going to upgrade from a different version of Linux. So realistically speaking, I'm not seeing enough here in what's new to say, I want to do it. You got Slick Greeter. Gee, I really need that. Some keyboard password stuff. You've got, that's the software manager. They got Visual Studio Coder. This is an IDE for working with Microsoft Visual Studio. You got a little bit of change in the picks from 3.2.8 to 3.12.2. If you do a lot of, if you use picks, maybe you want to update that. If you're not using picks, are you going to miss it? I don't. And besides, you are getting the updates if you are on 21.1 anyhow. It's just that this is a starting point for somebody coming to Mint for the first time. Now, you get a little bit of change in look and feel. They changed the idea of the folder icons and the icon on the folders and what they represent. So folder icons no longer feature a stripe. I didn't mind the stripe. Instead, each color received beautiful two-tone icons. Whoop-de-doo. This one is Yaru, or however you announce it. So you get that one, or you get something like this one that's teal using cyan icons. You got tool tips. Perhaps you need the tool tips. I can't say that I do, so I'm not missing it, even though I probably have that stuff in my version right now since I'm up to date, or it was up to date before this meeting started. Apparently, I got at least one more update coming in. Title bars. Redesigned the tile bar buttons. What was wrong with the old ones? That's my question. I'm not that picky a person on the looks and general style of the desktops. Some people are, and that's up to each individual. You got mono icons now. In other words, in the context menu, besides the words, you get a little icon here now. Whatever. XDG desktop portal. There was something that changed in it, and I don't know that it's going to affect all that many people. Also, it depends on whether, as a result, dark mode becomes the global setting, which is set in Cinnamon settings, or in the Mint desktop for Mate and XFCE. So if you upgrade to this 21.2, it might automatically change you to dark mode, and you'd have to go in and change it back. If you're on 21 or 21.1 and you got your regular updates, it didn't change anything, but you have the functional features that are listed here in 21.2. Styles. Cinnamon version 5.8 introduces new concepts called styles. Okay. These are maybe some nice things that some folks like. I don't, I'm not particularly one of those people. So right now, if you're on 21.1, you probably have version 5.6 of the desktop versus the 5.8. Right now I can't see upgrading to 21.2 just primarily so far to get me upgraded to the 5.8 desktop. I don't see the value. That's my own opinion. You got to do your own thing. Now, other improvements. The main menu is now resizable. Just drag the edge with a mouse to resize to your liking. Yeah. In some cases, maybe that's a good thing. I'm not so sure. Experimental theme support for bump PMAP and blur was added to Cinnamon. Now that's, I'm assuming, going to be in 5.8 desktop, not the 5.6 that I'm on right now. And I don't think I'm going to miss either one of these things. I'll eventually get them when I do upgrade, but I don't see that as a compelling reason to make me update. The notification for low level battery connection devices can be disabled now. Apparently, it wasn't disabled, able to be disabled in the past. This is only of concern if you got a laptop anyhow. I'm currently mostly on desktops. I do have Cinnamon on 2 laptops, and that's another issue. I have the software to be able to manage the battery. I can even modify on low-end former Windows laptops clock speed to get some better performance out of them. Otherwise, they're just about worthless. Warpinator had some kind of a change. I haven't used it yet, so I'm not missing something. Other improvements, Blue Man was upgraded. Now, if you're into having a lot of Bluetooth support, this could be a game changer, but you need to really look at it. 21.2 features full support for HEIF, which is an Apple format for pictures, and AVIF, which I'm not familiar with that one, but it's probably a video format from Apple. Adobe.
Tim,
Yep.
AVIF is one of these upgrades to GIF and JPEG for greater resolution.
Okay, well, since I'm not heavy into pictures to begin with, I don't think I'll miss it.
Yeah, there is a video mode, but it's primarily for still.
Okay. Adobe Illustrator documents are supported by XReader and Document Viewer. Mint Y Legacy was renamed to Mint L. If you enjoy darker themes, it's never been easier to select. I didn't know it was a problem to begin with. Folder color switcher no longer tries to guess icon color based on their theme name. The color matches the defined folder color switcher colors.d file. XReader cut that out. You'll have me doing it, and I've already done it twice today. XReader default to page mode with a maximized window. NVIDIA offload is now handled by libxapp and designated to switch switcheroo, I guess is the way they announce it. This is used by Cinnamon and Mint Menu. Artwork improvements. Artwork improvements come with all the version upgrades. Main components, you're really talking Cinnamon 5.8 for the desktop. The Linux kernel, we're already probably upgraded unless you're behind on your updates to the 15.5. And Ubuntu 22.04 base package base. Okay, Bob Prunk.
Just a bit about dark mode. I have a lot of trouble with dark mode. I have readability issues with it. So when when systems keep going over to dark mode, and they've been doing more and more of this because that's what gamers and phone users like, I find I do have to figure out in the settings, how do I get it back to prefer light or light mode? I think I did a little spiel about what happened with Chrome going all dark on me. It may not have been in this group, but in one of my groups. And I could not figure out why was Chrome or some web pages stuck in dark mode. And I could not get it out, and I could see the code, the underlying style, CSS, was saying, had this leading line that said from some external source, it was drawing the line prefer dark mode. And it wasn't inside of the Chrome flags. Turns out, I go into Deconf Editor, it's in the it's in the org.gnome settings. And those are really tricky. And this is what they're getting at here, except in Mint, I think they're going to try to put into the Cinnamon interface the ability to access that change that you can make. Prefer dark, prefer light, or default.
Yeah, that could be, and that's not a joke. It's just a case where myself, most of the time I'm in light mode, but even on the Windows 11, a lot of times, a lot of my stuff is dark mode. It's just individual machine and person preference. So
I just don't like to be involuntarily switched.
Yeah.
And that's what has been happening more and more with the Ubuntu family of Linux.
Well, I'm wondering if this statement about switcheroo in Mint is to help you switch that from one mode to another.
No, that's NVIDIA, mixed mode graphics.
Okay.
NVIDIA has always had problems, and there has always been a hybrid mode where it's onboard or card, and it mixes it. And there used to be Bumblebee, and then it went through a whole bunch of other iterations, and now it's supposed to be a little smoother with switcheroo.
Okay.
And you can select whether you're in hard or onboard.
Okay, Earl, you got your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to interject that the AVIF is the still image aspect of the new video code AV1, which is already supported by almost all browsers and things like VLC. But it isn't. AVIF has not yet become, I would guess, widely used for people to take and store images on. Although I went to, I think, the Tesla homepage and right-clicked on some of their pictures, and it did tell me they were AVIF. Kind of interesting.
Interesting.
Supposedly quite heavily compressed.
Okay.
Compared to existing still pictures.
Okay. Now, while we're still on Mint, the new upgrade, if you go down to your start button, type in system report, and there it is. I'm going to click on that. It comes up running, and this helps you upgrade if you want to. Just like we have done in the past with the 20 series of Mint. So this is how you get it accomplished. But they are giving you advice in here. Take a snapshot, save that off, and do some other prep work. And if you do, you're more likely to have good luck, especially if something went wrong. So this is the way of all Linux versions to some extent. They have different methodologies. I like Mint, and I think Ubuntu is adopting at least some of it in doing the upgrading from one version to the next. So we'll have to wait and see how things pan out. As far as I'm concerned right now, I'm not seeing anything jumping out at me, making me upgrade from 21.1 to 21.2. So as of the moment, I've done no update to 21.2, and I doubt that I will. I don't have enough time in the day anyhow. So All right, we'll move on to the next thing. This is a little interesting, and I haven't had time to get in any depth. I've been quite busy. Note on here that the last time it was updated was the 12th of June, 2020. This is, I think, active. What is TLDR? Or sometimes it's shown up as TL semicolon DR. Too long, didn't read is what it stands for. And what they're on this particular one, they're talking about Linux man pages. And Linux man pages are a real nightmare, especially for those that don't have any experience to very little experience in Linux, and they think they're going to go to the man pages, or somebody says, how about reading the man pages first before asking your question, because I think you'll find the answer. And I don't think that's a good way of putting it, because they are very, very lengthy documents in many cases, and quite confusing. All this does here is simplify the information extracted from the man page and giving you an abbreviated version that may be easier to comprehend, and thus answer your own question. In relation to that is this one here. This is a TLDR also, but this is a web page. That means it works in any OS from your browser. And the thing about this is you come down here, you enter an article's URL, and it'll give you back an abbreviated summary, or you can copy and paste in here the article text. And when was the last time any of you who are still using Windows read the EULA licensing agreement and understood it? This may be a way of getting a summary of what the EULA is trying to tell you, and before you say, I accept. So give that some thought. This is another one. Using a TLDR, best Linux command line help pages and sheets. And this gets into how to install on your system TLDR software itself. Usage examples it gives here. They were doing TLDR space LS for showing what we call in Windows a directory of your files out on the system, and extraneous information about each of the files and folders. Then you got down here in this one here example, TLDR space curl. And this is showing you the curl command in a summarized form that when you got enough knowledge and experience, you should be able to read through this, find the line of code doing what you want to do, and then you just put in the code example underneath, making the necessary changes as you put it in. Then there's one here that's TLDR space -L, and it's giving you a list of all supported command options in the cache. A specific platform usage. And then the next one is -A, and that's the cache we use. Then you have run options and so on and so forth. I'll let you read through it on that tip. Any questions so far? Oh, you guys are a lively bunch tonight. Apparently, you guys didn't get your nap in. How to run Ubuntu, and you don't have to think Ubuntu. This will apply to Mint, most likely almost identical as a Docker container. Now, a Docker container is basically akin to a virtual machine, but they're more lightweight and compact with only the basic requirement elements of an operating system to appreciate how minimal Docker container can be. Let's see how you can run Ubuntu in a Docker. Now, this has good practical sense. Snap packages and flat packages and app images are like a lightweight virtual machine that contains usually just a single application and all of its support libraries and other features. That's fine. This here is putting the operating system into a Docker and running from there. This has a parallel with VirtualBox, VMware, and KVM on Linux, which is a graphical user interface over QEMU virtual machine. And it's gives you the ability to run other operating systems as an example. And if those get hit by something bad, you blow it away and you put in a copy of that same container again and go from there. It's a safety net. You can think of it as another way of helping to secure your system from bad websites or malware and other things like that that can give you nightmares. So it gives you the code of what you want to do in Ubuntu, running the Docker image, etc. This gets a little geeky, so this is not for everybody, but this is something to keep in the back of your mind. You might not do anything with this today, but you never know, tomorrow something will come up and you've got at least a starting point for being able to do what amounts to a virtualization. And it is a quite extensive article, gives you a lot of information how to get it set up and running. And I'll bet you could change Ubuntu to Mint, maybe Debian, and several other distros that are in the Debian general family. So anybody got any comment on that?
So I may be way out of line with this comment, but I'll throw it out and you can tell me to go away. It won't hurt my feelings. Our group is trying to promote the use of Proxmox, which is a virtual machine generator.
Yes, it is.
I'm wondering, how would this Docker container compare to doing something like Proxmox?
I haven't looked in Proxmox itself. I am aware of it. I have I started looking at KVM, and I've been so tied up I haven't been able to get back to the KVM on Linux. That's like I said, a graphical user interface for QEMU virtual machine software. I think Proxmox, like KVM, like VirtualBox and VMware, those are the more traditional, I'll call them full-featured virtual machines. A Docker is a lightweight virtualization that acts as a container. Think of it as a pitcher, which you pour water, milk, whatever into, and it stays there until you do something else with it.
Good
And
enough.
so this is real lightweight stuff. Proximate would be a heavier duty. If you ever had any experience with VirtualBox, VMware, I haven't done the KVM and QEMU as yet. QEMU is command line virtualization, and that gets to be pretty hairy to do. So the KVM gives you the graphic user interface. So I don't know if I answered what you're looking at, but I would say Docker is a lighter weight. It's something you can use to custom tailor, kind of like they're doing with Snap, Flatpaks, and App Image. Those are, but there you might have, say, Firefox in a Snap Pack or in a Flatpak. Well, here with Docker, you can put the whole operating system and run the operating system from within that. And like I said, if you have something bad happen via the internet, malware, hacker, or some thing, it's going to protect you. You kill the Docker image. Hopefully you have a backup, or you have to rebuild it from scratch. Bob Premick.
Thank you.
There, I was looking into an article about Docker versus virtual machine, and it appears that the containers that Docker makes are smaller and more. You can even isolate an app with it, whereas you wouldn't be doing that in a virtual machine, which covers the whole entire operating system.
Right.
So instead of creating an entire like a child directory, it creates isolated environments for applications, and it will treat the core of your operating system as an application.
Right. That's why, and that's general terms, what Snappak, Flatpak, and App Image are doing with individual application programs. And whereas the Docker, like VMware, VirtualBox, KVM, and QEMU, among other, including the one you brought up, Bob Baxter, that are full-featured ones, and you're putting the operating system into those virtual machines. And then within each virtual machine you create on one of those, you would put in whatever applications you want to do and feel safer going out on the internet through that virtual machine than your regular running machine, because it acts as a container to contain bad stuff that won't affect the rest of your system. You just lose maybe that container because it's been hosed in some fashion. You get rid of that container, and you either replace it with a copy of that container and are back in business, or you have to rebuild the container. I hope that comes across, especially with Bob Premick's added information. Bob, go ahead.
There is a caveat. It's difficult to move data into and out of some container environments.
Yes.
If you want something to be stored in your home directory, or if you want to go to an external drive for storage or for backup or for a copy or for a version, or if you want to share with another application that is also in a container, For example, you might want to share something with Thunderbird that is stuck in Firefox as a snap or as a Flatpak. You will run into some interesting problems, especially with Snap. Not too bad with Docker and Flatpak, but it still is tricky.
I'll tell you right now, when you are thinking of getting into virtualization, you always run into these problems because it acts as a sheltered container to protect you and your machine as the host machine. And because of that, trying to get things out of it, to use a lower grade concept, if you're familiar with sandboxing, and it's coming back stronger in a lot of the browsers and so forth too, is sandboxing, and it's in Windows, but what you gotta comply with to activate it, I don't know that it's worth it. I used to use years ago Sandboxy as an application, but getting your stuff transferred that you think is okay out of the sandbox into your host system can be an aggravating problem. But this is something you have to research and find out how to do it, and you either accept it or maybe you skip it altogether. But you can also use virtual environments, especially the ones that have a whole operating system, to do much of what you do out on the web, where you are not usually transferring something from the virtual environment into the host environment. Usually where you're doing that is I want to get a hold of a piece of software. So I'm doing it from the virtual machine. You download the program. Your next task is, as long as you feel it's okay, taking it out of the virtual machine environment and putting it into the file system of your host. And that, in some cases, can be challenging, but it's something you have to know about. It's a real situation, and it's deliberate that way to prevent basically something bad that you went to on the virtual machine out on the web from destroying possibly your real host system on the machine, such as ransomware. Maybe you go to a website and boom, they got you with ransomware. Well, the ransomware is strictly in the container, the virtualized machine. You can kill that machine and either rebuild it, or if you've got a clone copy, you restore the clone copy, and within a very short time, you are back in business. I do have, remind me of this topic if we got a little time towards the end. I've got, on a couple of my machines here, virtual machines. The bad part is it could bog down this system and bring it to its knees. That's another reason why I am not doing it that way. So I'm going to move on to the next topic. Now, this is an interesting little topic, and I've got some things that are my opinion. You can ignore what I'm saying, or you can roll the dice and do your own thing. This is installing any distro, not take out the word Ubuntu and say any Linux distro, and install it on a USB flash drive. Now, within this article, I'll tell you up front that it is taking and giving you a idea of putting it on a flash drive as a minimal install. And they are using in the article Rufus. You can also use Belinda Etcher. It'll work probably just as well. Though I will give you one caveat. If you get the portable version of Rufus and you run it on a Windows 10 system, there's one little change you can make, and it doesn't come up instantly, but what happens is you have options there, a down arrow in a little box to the right of the select button, which select is used to select on your system an ISO you already downloaded. But it gives you the with that arrow a download option. It used to have Linux distros in there too, not too many, but some. And they took them all out, and there's only Windows updates. So if you're got Windows machines, you can get old versions of the ISO, put them on a flash drive, and do systems repairs of your older versions of Windows, but they also have the most current version. But right below that gives you the ability to set up persistent read-write storage on the thumb drive. Okay, why? Because you can then download updates of Linux. I don't recommend that. It really takes up a lot of space, but you can add apps to it because their suggestion here, a minimal installation. So most of the stuff that normally comes with that distro aren't going to be there. It'll only be the stripped down OS and a few tools and not much else. So you're expected to add your own application programs that you want and need. Normally, I can take Mint and put it on and run successfully with 32 gigabyte drive. With a minimal distribution, you might get away with a 16 gig drive, but normally when this thing is showing you putting it on the drive, their concept is the blob, meaning it makes one partition for the whole operating system, just like Windows and Mac OS do, versus creating a root partition, a home partition, and possibly a swap partition, unless you're okay with using the swap file. By doing it with the partitions, if something goes wrong, you may be able to just reinstall the root system and not touch the home partition and be back up quicker. That's the purpose of, biggest purpose of doing individual partitions. I don't recommend USB drives for this unless it's something you would use on a rare occasion, not on a regular basis. USB flash drives are really designed as a replacement for old floppy disk and optical disks. And their reliability really varies all over the place. Some have very good reputations and will give you a long lifetime. But others, they could crap out at any time and you've lost everything that's on the drive and the drive itself. My recommendation, and please take it with a grain of salt. And let's see if I can grab this. Now, this is a 32 gigabyte flash drive. I can put Mint as an example or Ubuntu on this thing. It has limitations on how much free space is out there to add in programs and stuff like that and be able to do my updates. That's why I don't recommend it. On the other hand, that kind of a flash drive can be used as a learning tool so that you can play with Linux at your leisure, running on the flash drive. You don't care what happens to it down the line. When you got enough knowledge and experience, you may blow it all away and create a normal large version of the installation, or you may take it and use a different version of Linux than what we're using in this group. On the other side of the coin, it used to be on low-end machines, they had a separate card for memory called M-SATA drive. They've replaced that with a soldered onboard eMMC storage. This is an example of an M-SATA drive. Now I have two others, and I put them into a housing like this that plugs into a USB. These are treated and about as reliable as a regular SATA drive that we might normally use in our machines to begin with. It's just slower, okay? But I can put it in a housing just like this. The ones I've got in here now were the first ones I made. They're 32 gigabytes in size, and that's perfectly fine. Like I said, I know how to engineer it. This is a 128 gigabyte drive. I can do a normal operating system, almost any Linux distro I choose to. So that's another option. A third option, this is the one I recommend the most. It's a little bit less portable than that small M-SATA. This is a full USB 2.5 inch housing with a solid state drive in it, and the size is up to you. It depends on what you're going to do with your operating system to begin with. I'm running the demonstration like last month and the month before that on a Mint 21.1 that is in a drive just like this, and it runs perfectly fine and with reasonable speed. So this is what I would recommend, or at minimum, the M-SATA drive with its little housing. I think a little housing like this you can probably get for $12, $13. And this, I already had them from old machines, so I didn't pay anything, but you can pick them up off of eBay. I don't always like the prices, so do your shopping on that. But right now, the 2.5 inch one that I showed you there has Ubuntu Cinnamon Desktop. So this is an interesting article. It gives you food for thought and steps you through how to set up really any USB storage device that has enough space. And like I said, with the thumb drive, you might want to use persistent storage. But what you have to do is put it out there without, and try and estimate how much free space is on the drive, then go through again with persistent storage to its maximum, and that gives you read-write ability, because usually on a thumb drive, it does not give you the ability to keep adding stuff. But here they've got a little trick. They're taken from a Windows machine, which they figure you're going to be creating this on, and copy the Windows EFI partition. They have you set up the EFI partition, which is very different on Earl's machine than any distro I have used setting up an EFI partition. And bottom line, I normally set up an EFI of no more than 200 megabytes. They're recommending 500. Copy the Windows EFI partition onto it, and they give you some of the reasons of how to do it and why to do it. So it gives you a portable system, but I don't agree with everything they're trying to have you do. So take it with a grain of salt is my credo. Next up is how to fix grub not showing in dual boot setup. Dual boot setup, when you do it, sometimes you have trouble with grub not being able to modify the EFI partition on Windows. This is one such fix. But if as soon as you do an upgrade in Windows, it's going to knock out grub altogether. If you have more than one Linux distro installed on a Windows in a multi-boot configuration, you have to remember what the last version of Linux was. You have to have a tool that I haven't used that allows you to boot into that distro. And then you have to go through commands to install grub and update the grub configuration, and then you're back in business again. It's a hassle. It's one of the main reasons I don't recommend dual booting. Most people default to installing the Linux as a blob, just like Windows is and Mac OS is. And instead of doing separate partitions for the root and home partitions at minimum, whether you use a swap file or a swap partition, that's up to you. And I want to mention before I forget it, when you're doing SSD setups, always leave about 5 gigabytes or so of unused space, no partition. You leave it raw. And the reason is, on an old spinning hard drive, you have an inaccessible area for when you have bad spots developed on the spinning platter. And it will automatically try and recover and save as much information in the bad spots into the reserved area. Up to 10% of your disk can be in bad spaces. Now, there is no such thing in an SSD. The SSD raw space is generally referred to as over provisioning, and it gives you the same concept as that area that's on a spinning hard drive, so that when cells start going bad, it tries to figure out what information was stored there and put it in the reserved raw area in the same manner that it happens on a hard drive for a bad spot. So this gives you some ways of dealing with grub boot priorities. It gives you a Linux installation for the boot menu, disable fast boot recommendation. I get away with fast boot on, but I know Bob Premick has had instances where he needed to shut it off. You got editing the path. You've got other recommendations. I'll let you go through that yourself. It's something to keep in mind in case you run into problems. Bob Crummett.
Yeah, about what I ran into, at least in Windows 10, if it's on the same hard drive or the same drive, for Linux to boot correctly, fast boot, fast startup for Windows 10 did have to be disabled.
Okay. I've had, it's been a while since I did dual boot, even with 10. I didn't have to turn it off. Can't tell you why.
With external USB or Thunderbolt connected drives, I do not find such issues.
Like I said, I don't know all the ins and outs of why sometimes you have to turn it off and other times it works just fine. At least I haven't seen an explanation of it yet. At any rate, and fast boot, by the way, is only to help Windows boot up quicker. It has no effect other than possibly stopping Linux from booting up, in which case you got to turn it off. But otherwise, if the system will allow you to run the Linux with fast boot on, it means absolutely nothing to Linux. Okay, now here's an odd one, and it's a security issue. 5 easy ways of checking for open ports on Linux. Now, in general, what are network ports? Network ports are logical access points on your system that can be used as a channel to the host multiple services. A port is represented by a 16-digit integer, so that the highest port number is basically 64K. That's what that is. Now, you can think of ports like windows and doors of a house. Basically, all the different entry points to the house and or computer. Ports are of 3 types. System ports numbered 1 through 1023. Registered ports from 1024 to 49,151. And empirical or dynamic ports from 49,151 to 64K limit. Generally speaking, most of us know the system ports to some extent. Port 80 is for general internet HTTP connections. SMTP is another one. Your FTP is another one. You have also 463 or 483, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, is the SSL port, which is used for internet HTTPS. So if you're going to a secure website, it's going to use the 463 or 483 port number. There are ways of getting around some of this and changing port numbers. Okay, it was 443. Okay, so I was a little high, but I was in the ballpark. Registered ports are usually your application software. Some, not all, open up ports. And there are 2 types, TCP and UDP. TCP has some valid protections in the protocol. UDP does not. It's very high risk. So it's a case where you don't want ports open that you don't need really to have open, to reduce the chances of something getting into your system from the outside and possibly posing your system to taking control of your system is about what it amounts to. This gives you information of 5 ways to check for the open ports on your system. It's a bit geeky because it's all command line. But it gives you pretty much all the instructions how to do this and some of the option switches that you may have that you want to take advantage of, and how many of you would use this version. I'm not too sure. But if we got the time at the end of the meeting, I've got an old tool you might like to use in place of this. But don't forget this, because sometimes this through the command line is the best way of getting positive results you need. Bob Baxter.
Yes, going back to your putting distros on a USB drive, any comments on Ventoy? Are you familiar with it? I'm sure you are.
Okay, but Ventoy would eliminate the early steps. In other words, let's go back to that one. Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, basically, prerequisite is deciding what distro you want, downloading the media, and normally you'd use Rufus or Etcher to get the ISO content properly put onto a flash drive, 8 or 16 gigabytes in size. And then you would use that to boot your system in order to either just run it or install that version somewhere on the computer. It doesn't have to be your installed drive. If you want to, you can take the downloaded ISO instead of doing this and put it on the Yummy or Ventoy flash drive as a plain ISO. It will run the content instead of you burning it onto a separate flash drive. That's where Ventoy and Yummy come in. So you'd skip that part, run the actual ISO directly from the toy, and go ahead and install either on a second flash drive, or I suggest an mSATA drive through USB, or a plain SATA drive through a external USB housing. In both cases, you're skipping your internal drive as the install point, and you're on your own from that point. You just have to be careful. You know the drive you're trying to install to, and not to your internal hard drive, unless that's where you want the installation to go. Does that answer the question?
It helps. I understand. I think. Yeah, I've been playing with that. I've got a 32 gigabit USB drive.
Ventoy and the older Yummy tool, you are storing the actual ISO instead of using Rufus, Etcher, and some other tools for opening up the ISO, taking its content out, and putting it on a separate flash drive that's 8 to 16 gigs in size, and then booting your system off of that drive.
Exactly. And I have put Manjaro on I have an older Windows laptop that I'm not going to use for Windows anymore, and I installed it on there.
That's fine. That works
Yeah.
absolutely fine. You have the same look and feel as if you did use Rufus or Etcher to create a separate drive, boot the system off that separate drive you just created, is the same as using Ventoy and Yummy, where you put the ISO onto it, selected it from all the entries you have on that drive, and you're running the same kind of environment. Bob Premick?
Yeah, the other thing that Ventoy is good for is putting a bunch of utilities you're going to use alongside of the installer or before the installer, such as gparted, and if you need to repair grub, there's a grub repair boot repair disk,
Right.
and that's one click solves most of the most common problems.
Correct.
And it'll solve the problem of where Windows has wiped out grub.
That's correct.
It will, you don't have to actually do the gymnastics of going inside of your Linux installed Linux and having to mount everything and have the correct authorizations and permissions and all that. Anyway, the other thing I want to mention is, though I haven't done this, Ventoy does advertise that they are capable of setting up persistence.
Yes, that's a fairly new feature, and I think Yummy adopted it also.
I don't know whether that persistent partition could be shared among several different distros, several different ISOs.
I wouldn't recommend it, but if I'm correct, and I'm not 100% on it, on Ventoy and probably on Yummy, I think the persistent is for that image, not as a global read-write area, because you're using the persistent area if you want to download some updates to that OS that are beyond what came with the OS, or application packages, or data files you're creating.
Yeah, okay, so it's not like creating a user data area which can be shared.
I don't think so.
Okay, this is different.
My opinion, and I may be 100% wrong.
No, you're right about persistence being different from a separate user data partition,
Yeah,
which could be shared.
and I would think, and I don't know if it could even be done with either one of those toys, to create a separate partition that could be, you'd have to modify each of the ISOs that would use it, and that gets tricky, to automatically mount that separate partition. You just have an arbitrary name on that, common storage or something like that. I don't know. And,
A common way of saying it is that it's your user data partition, and there may be specialized ISOs for some distros that are aimed toward being able to do that. Personally, I wouldn't do that because I've been able to install Linux onto external enclosures, as you suggest, and with especially Thunderbolt, you've got plenty of speed. You can get the I/O that you need, especially on a modern PC. If you've got an older machine, I wouldn't do it. But I have successfully run Linux off of external enclosures for, at least a couple of years now.
oh, I have too, and right now this version of Mint is on a larger drive because I was trying to get into KVM, which I haven't gotten to yet. Prior to that, I was using a 32 gigabyte drive, similar to this, and I use a USB adapter device that just plugs it into here, and I just run it that way for even before I started doing the Linux group. So it's something that is quite doable. I don't recommend necessarily for most people using the drive with one of the loose interfaces. You're better off with a housing that helps protect the drive and keep it clean too. And you still get the same end results. Now, I'm gonna go back to the next article if there's nothing else in the way of comments or questions. Okay, next one. How to quickly reset a forgotten password on Ubuntu. And I'll lay you odds are it works fine in Mint and many other odds and ends. I have done something close to this, but not this specific purpose. I had basically what you're doing, this is teaching you when you're in the grub menu, how to get into recovery mode. I've had to use this part to recover a non-booting Linux distribution, and it worked perfectly. But in addition, you can use the same tool to bring up root, and from there you can enter commands to basically mount things and change the password of any user on that OS. So if you've got only one user, that's a piece of cake. If you got 2, 3, 4 users on the same disk, you can change the ones you need to change. So this takes a little of the mystery out of it. It does work. And the one I had to recoup was called Garuda Linux. And there's features of it I like. So that's why I happen to have it. It's on the same machine as the Linux Mint is on, but the Garuda is on the internal drive and Mint's on the USB drive. Next, I'm going to go, now this is a series of articles. It gets geeky, but some distros you get, it's already built in, and some distros it is not. I only know of one way to find out. So it's has to do with killing processes on the Linux desktop with xkill. If I bring up a terminal, if I type in xkill space hyphen version, this is saying I'm running, I have on the system xkill version 1.0.5. All I needed to know was it's already on this Linux Mint. But I have other systems of Linux where xkill doesn't exist. These articles tell you how to add it to the system. Now, why would I need it? I don't remember at this point because it was 2 or 3 months back. I had been playing with new installations of Linux, and I don't remember all the details, but basically I had a user graphical interface up on the desktop, and it froze up. And it didn't matter what you do, including a restart, if you can get it to restart your system, would not eliminate that frozen screen. However, in some cases, not all, I could do a shutdown, let it sit for half a minute to a minute, boot it back up, and this frozen screen might be gone. No guarantee. Xkill is cute. You set up, if necessary, if you got it installed on Mint, Alt F4, just like on Windows operating systems. Whatever the active window is going to be effective, but they have an added feature under Linux with Xkill. You do the Alt. Hang on 1 second here. I want to bring up something else here. I'm just bringing up this program arbitrarily. Now, if I do Alt F4, what happened? It killed the process. In some versions, it will give you an X key, an X cursor pointer, and you put it on the title bar of the offending frozen user interface that's on your desktop, click it, and it disappears. So there are two ways of doing it. The Alt F4 on Mint kills the active on top window. If the window I wanted was this window here, I would have had to have brought that forward over Stacer. And when I did the Alt F4, this browser screen would disappear, killing the process. And so on these, it gets kind of geeky. You're going to have to accept it at some point in time anyhow. But it gives you for Debian, Kali-based Linux, Garuda, and Ubuntu command. You got Arch, you got CentOS, which is a competitor with Red Hat server, and Fedora, which is for the enterprise level 2. And it goes through some of the things that you may do with trying to understand what your process is that's froze up, and you can kill it the old way, like with plain kill and the process number following it, or you can use pkill and the name of the offending application, etc. But Xkill without the terminal, meaning you got to open up a terminal, run Xkill. It will give you the shortcut keys, and some of these articles will show you how to set up the bindings of a shortcut to Xkill. Geeky, like I said, I can't get away from that, but so far I've got to do this on some of my other systems that don't have Xkill natively available, and Mint happily does. It's come in handy before, and I'm not joking when I say that. So these several of these articles will get you some ideas of how to kill processes and or frozen applications and or windows. There's quite a bit of information here. This one here is trying to show you creating the keyboard shortcuts. And in their example, they were using Shift Control Alt X. Well, I prefer, I guess, the Windows keys of Alt F4, which Mint already comes pre-configured with. And I think that's a better choice myself. You do what you want to do. Killing Linux process, another one here that gives you the idea. You find out what the process number of the offending program is. You issue kill space with that process number, it kills it. Or you say pkill and give it the name of the application, and it kills it that way. but it also gets into X-kill. And you might say that each one of these is by different people with different perspectives of the same topic. So we're unresponsive process. This is several choices of articles that go deeper into killing processes on your Linux system. So have at it on that one. Any questions so far about Xkill? Okay, you're talking a bunch. Now here's an interesting one that's an add-on. What is the equivalent of Xkill on Wayland? Now, it gives you some information here in the writing, but it's not completely clear. You'd have to create an account and log in to be able to see all the answers that came in with this forum question, because apparently somebody was needing to kill an application on a Ubuntu with Wayland as the desktop manager instead of X11. But there might be enough information here to give you a starting point of what oddities there are under Wayland that you may need to address versus if you're running on X11. Mint, to the best of my memory, is running on Wayland. This Xkill does work, and I was able to use the Alt F4 that was set up initially with Linux Mint. So I'll let you go from there on that one. This one here is, ignore the idea that this was about the CentOS operating system. Accidentally X-killed desktop and taskbar. If you're not careful in Linux, it will do a lot of things, including wiping out everything on your drive. And at best, it will say, do you really want to do this? And if you say yes, it'll completely wipe out everything on your Linux drive. And you either have to restore a backup and get it back up to current date or start from scratch. So this here is talking about possible ways that if you used Xkill and accidentally killed your desktop and or taskbar, and it's specifically talking about KDE Plasma. It applies to any desktop and taskbar panel. And some things you might want to run afterwards, at least in KDE. They don't tell you other things you might have to do in other desktop environments, but it might give you an avenue to recover quickly from your mistake. And that's the whole idea. Instead of you going berserk and panicking and so on and so forth, this might give you the out. Next. Now, especially in the West, but it can apply to the Appalachian Mountain areas. Those that live closest to the mountain may have reception problems of broadcast radio, television, and amateur radio transmissions. What some amateurs do, and there are some in the APCUG groups, they build a shack near the mountain tops while they live much lower down in the valley area. And they might have Raspberry Pis, they may have regular computers. It doesn't matter what the device is in particular, but they can SSH into the remote computer and use the remote computer just as if it was on the desktop. It works much like TeamViewer, AnyDesk, and other remote control programs you might use in helping other people out with their system, like I do. So, in fact, this applies to any of you guys. If you need some help sometime, it's best you have on your Linux system AnyDesk. And if you're the person giving the service, even though it's free to use as a non-commercial endeavor, I have to register. If you help out somebody else, you have to register. But to receive the help, you don't have to register. And AnyDesk, I don't know if we can get this to show. Yeah, good. That's my AnyDesk. That's my number on this particular machine. I have AnyDesk on several machines, so I get different numbers for each one of them. And this is the last person I helped, their address, and this happens to be Earl McCoy. And I can, if I want to help him out again, I just click on this one here and try and connect to his machine. It does require that whoever has the machine give permission, but there's a way of setting it up that this is your remote machine and you set it for automatic acceptance of the connection with the machine you're in front of to that remote machine. So this is really a simple article. It gives you how to set up SSH. Does a pretty good job. I haven't done SSH presently, but I have been remembering to try and get some free time to do it. You can even SSH into Raspberry Pi from an Android smartphone. Whether you can do that on an iPhone, I don't know. It's a real possibility. I just can't answer the question. That's something you can research. The next article I got, if I can get it to come up. Wait, this thing's going to give me a headache. Some of Zoom's getting in my way. Now, the main topic, that's the end of tips, except for one. This is the main topic. Sick of Microsoft, how to make a switch from Windows to Linux. And some of you are in this boat. Unfortunately, Wayne is up and running some, but I don't know how comfortable he feels with the Linux. Dennis hasn't gotten there yet. Bob Baxter says he's learning it. Well, this article and several others I have here give you some of the reasons why to and how to do some things that you normally might do in a Windows environment on your Linux environment. This is another one. Switch from Windows to Linux, a beginner's guide. And I think it's worth the read to go through. It helps you understand some of the issues you're going to come up with trying to go from Windows to a Linux environment. I think I've got to move this over again. And that's the bad part. And I got to move it back so you'll be able to read the damn thing. And this one here is how to switch OS from Windows to Linux in case you're still not too sure about how to get Linux put onto another computer. And this is the bonus one. And this gets into ports that I brought up in the earlier article. Son of a gun. Talk about. You didn't even come up there. Okay. What happened here? Uh-oh. This is a, oh, I see why. Hang loose. I'm trying to. I got a little bug. Okay. How to seamlessly switch to Linux from Windows environment. And it goes through some great things as well. And gets you onto it. Now it says have some wine. A little caveat there. Wine is not an emulator. It allows some Windows programs and apps to run on a Linux box. It can be a pain to configure. There are some distros that have 1 or 2 levels of automatic configuration in them. Usually the second level of configuration, you have to say, okay, I want that, versus no, I'll stay with the basic configuration. I want to direct you from wine directly to bottles. Bottle is a graphical user interface for the management of wine so that you can more easily configure things and add your Windows programs. Outside of gamers, and if you are a gamer, one of the good ones is Sparky for gaming versus just plain Sparky. It's a Linux distro. It's pre-configured to support Wine and Windows applications. And it may give you the kind of environment you need to run your applications. Hopefully you only have 1 or 2, no more than 3 Windows applications you cannot get away from and go 100% to a Linux environment. Hopefully one day you will find an acceptable replacement for each Windows application you are running under Wine, and get rid of the application under Wine and stop using Wine altogether. Uses the same browsers, is like I mentioned 1 or 2 meetings back, all browsers work on all platforms. It's a terrific cross-platform application. AnyDesk works on any desktop that I know of. And I think it also works on Android, and I think it said iPhone, iPad, but I won't swear to that at the moment. So these, and basically what to do with an old PC. And that's what I've been doing too. Some low-level Windows machines that don't run Windows worth a tinker's damn, I have converted to Linux. Peter.
Okay, so this going from Windows to Linux thing. Okay, so I managed to get a hold of a Dell 24-inch all-in-one.
Yep.
i7 7th generation.
Whoo. You don't see.
Nice little box. Only problem is I don't have the power supply for it yet. And the one I got had closest, the Dell OS is telling me I've got to use a Dell power supply.
Yeah. At times in the past, you could interchange Dell and other power supplies like HP, but and more, they're able each to detect that you are using the wrong power supply. You got to use the right one, or it won't work.
Okay, so that I know. The thing is that this came from a recycler, and they pulled the hard drive.
Right, that's normal.
That's
Not
normal.
I've bought stuff from recyclers in the past too.
So I'm thinking, first of all, once I get a power supply that will actually work with the BIOS, because that's where that message comes up from, is to boot from a USB in Linux. Just to tell me if the rest of the system is still good, because I have no history on the system.
Yeah, but basically all you're going to get when you plug it in and turn it on is system's BIOS at most. You can look through the settings, make any changes you want, save those settings, unless you also need a CMOS battery because of age. But if you've got a hard drive spinning or solid state, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's on it. You can plug it in. If it's bootable and has an OS, it may boot up off of it.
Okay.
And that's not a joke. I've done this for years. I like playing with the throwouts by other people who don't know what they're doing with a computer to start with. And I can figure out what the hell's going on, get them fixed and working, and get a working system very cheap that way. Another way of getting a hold of a machine, used one like that, only you may get all of it, is through garage sales, yard sales, etc.
Yeah, I've got more than enough machines to play with.
Oh, I know, I do too, but that's another source. And here's my opinion. Now, I do a remote support for other people on Windows, and I've only had one that we tried to do on Linux. We ran into too many problems, so I had to do a physical hands-on. But in general, I like people that need help have at least two computers, so that on one system I can do a virtual conversation with them, and without using a phone, because phones have batteries. Batteries have a specific life, and some of my tech support may go 4 hours. I think I've even had one or two as much as 6 hours in one stretch. And you're playing games with the damn batteries as to how long they'll last. So having a second computer that I can do a Zoom meeting, a Google Meet meeting, Skype, you get the idea. I can do that on a secondary machine while I do something like AnyDesk or some similar remote desktop program to the target machine, and then I can manipulate, and I can be talking to that person, versus most of the remote applications, you can only use a chat feature at best. Well, I don't want to be doing something and have to type out a message to a person. They got to read it and try and understand it, and then do what I'm asking them to do. Being able to talk to them like we're talking right now is a big plus.
So the idea here is either I find a drive that's got a OS on it, a Windows OS that works, or I convert it to a Linux box. And if it's a Windows box, I may use it as a machine controller for either a laser printer or a CNC, a laser cutter or a CNC. Or I may actually just, if it's a Linux box, I may also give it back to a school to let the kids play with it.
Well, another thing. Now, if you stick in a drive, let's say it's blank, there's not a damn thing on it, whether it's spinning or an SSD. You still might, when you first power it up, get the BIOS because it's not recognizing everything when it first boots up, and it starts recognizing in the BIOS devices like the drive. And
I get the F12 button. The F12 brings up the BIOS.
Right now it does because you don't have anything else there. If you got a drive inside the system, it may still bring up the BIOS because it doesn't know the drive until it brings up the BIOS.
Right.
BIOS will then recognize what the drive is. If you do an F10 and exit the BIOS, it would then look for that specific drive. If there's no OS on it because it's blank, it'll tell you no bootable operating system. If it's got a bootable operating system on it, it may attempt to boot it up, but it may not have all the drivers that it needs. And so it may, especially if it's like a Windows drive, it may go out while it's booting up and pull in drivers it needs for that specific machine to make the Windows work. That's how the mechanics work. Okay?
Yep.
Now, here's the bonus one. This guy is Steve Gibson. He's been around for 36 years. He started off with a program to manage your hard drive and get it to an optimized performance state. But he added lots and lots of things over the years. He's known for his networking prowess. SpinRite itself still exists. It works with FAT, Linux, Novell, and all other file systems. It can be used in data recovery. But the main one is New Shields Up Test. This checks for TCP and UDP ports that are open and lets you know if there may be a risk with them open. And then you have to look up, how do I close an open port I don't want open? If I click on Shields Up highlight here, this is what comes up. I run proceed. It goes through doing a test. And in the test, it's going to instantly UDP testing because it's more of a problem than the TCP ports. And I'm going to check it. It says my IP address from the ISP is this. And it says the equipment at the target IP address do not respond to our UPnP probes. And that's good news. Now, it doesn't give me any other problems here. So it's something that can give you some check in a GUI environment. It's through your web browser. and it's on my list of articles. So that in mind, because it's getting late, I'm gonna wait a minute. Let me get out of sharing. You dirty, no good, expletive deleted. It's not exiting out of. Wow. Let's see if I can do it this way. I'm a little tick right at the moment because right now Zoom is out of control on the Linux. And I didn't update it because I didn't know about it in time. Where the heck did I put the darn things? Oh boy. Having a real good time right now. I'm trying to get the file that's on here. Okay. Where are you at? Oh, you dirty son of a gun. Just put it in the home directory. No wonder I'm going bonkers. Okay. Let's look at this chat. Okay, out in the chat, you should see my July Linux file. Click on the blue button with a down arrow and it should put a copy on your machine. I hope it put it in a better place than what was put on my machine. I got to move the file. But at least we got it, and you can get a copy of all the articles I went through and read them at your leisure in depth. A lot of this is not so much things you're going to want and need to use right now, but down the road, you may want to refer back to a document like this as a resource for some of the information you may need for various issues that come up in your use of your computers with Linux. At least that's my hope. Okay, now, I'm gonna zoom on this other machine's going to get a X kill. That's what it's going to get. Anyway, anybody got any further ideas, comments, etc.?
I have one quick question on bottles.
Go ahead.
Just all my other Linux friends, you guys are probably in that bucket too. You can do anything on Linux that you can do anyplace else. There are a couple of exceptions. I have not found anything to replace Quicken.
You ain't gonna probably
I don't think so.
Quicken replacement. You are not the first person that's had that issue. There are some applications out there. I don't know how satisfying they're going to be for Quicken substitution. especially on Linux. I haven't even looked at Linux, but this issue comes up on Windows applications. And there are some out there. You have to basically look at reviews of some of those applications, doing research, and try and find the one that might fit your taste in what you were doing in Quicken. QuickBooks is another one. QuickBooks is now going straight to the cloud. They don't want to support it on the desktop anymore. Now, Bert Good is CCS VP. He is also a CPA, and he has always hated the online version, but it was in its early stages when he hated it. I don't know what his opinion is right now, but in either case, you either use an outdated and continually being more outdated QuickBooks version on your desktop, or you got to move to the Quicken online version. It normally when you run a QuickBook, and I think it also applied to Quicken, is it would do an online backup of your application data file.
Yes.
Whether you knew that or not. And that's in case something goes wrong, they've got a copy of it and can help get you back to where you were before things went kablooey. But lots of stuff, if you're not aware of it, is going straight online. You've got the Microsoft Office. They're still supporting it on the desktop. You got Adobe. It's all been on online for years. So what are you going to do? Basically speaking, and I did this in the South Suburban Computer Club, is I went through the fact that they're more and more seriously looking at having your Windows in the cloud. Therefore, you have the equivalent of a terminal. And I think it's going to be referred to as Windows Core. So you would boot up your local computer into Windows Core, and that would then connect to your online account, for which you have to do a subscription annually, just like Microsoft 365. But all maintenance of updates, whether they're patches for bugs, security updates, program enhancements, etc., those are all in the background, just like in Microsoft Office. If you've got Microsoft Office on the desktop, at best, once a month, you get an cumulative update, which may or may not contain the latest, greatest bug fixes and security patches that the online version is getting when that came after the package you download once a month to update your desktop version. There's also talk that they may have basically a dual boot Windows system, where you still have for a period of time your regular desktop installation of Windows, which would be 11 or the coming 12 that may come out in the fall of next year. They're on a 3-year cycle now for new versions of Windows. And all the versions still last 10 years, which is the only OS that goes that long. And you have also, as a secondary boot, like in a grub menu, the option of Windows Core. so that you turn your computer into a terminal connected to the cloud, and everything you're doing on that at that time is being done and stored in the cloud only. The only thing is the reliability of your internet service. Big enterprises, big companies, and some large medium companies, they usually have 2 or more ISPs. They make sure the cables from each ISP they are using comes in from a different direction, so that if there's some kind of a drunk driver taking out a telephone pole, or some contractor digs up the cable that your internet goes through, okay, one of your lines goes down, but you have 1 or 2 other ISPs still coming in, your business keeps functioning. That doesn't happen in the home. In the home, you got one internet service provider. If anything happens to the lines between you and that service provider, you're out of luck. If you're trying to run a business, say a medium size down to a small mom and pop business, you're out of business until you get the internet back. If you got the internet version of the Windows desktop, every day you better take every file you modify, copy it down to your local computer, and hope that core installation or the full running version of the desktop can take that data, present it to you locally until the internet comes back, and maybe you can keep your business functioning to some degree. It may not be perfect, but at least you have a chance of keeping the business open. How do you like that ample? And this,
well, I can certainly see the manufacturer, Microsoft and those companies, their value to them is that they don't have to have the maintenance crew that they have to supply all of us with these updates that we resist putting in, so it makes it harder for them.
that's right. But that's why Quicken is dumping the desktop on QuickBooks and going only online. They dropped Quicken because there wasn't probably enough profit in it, and they didn't want to take it to the cloud. And they dumped that, oh God, a lot of years ago. Probably more than 5 years ago.
It's been a while.
I don't have a good answer for you. There is a program under Windows called Mint, believe it or not. And it's not the operating system in Linux. It is supposed to be one of the, I'll call it a clone of Quicken. And you have to be careful with copyrighted shit. Microsoft has a lot of experience at that themselves with arguments with Apple that end up in a lot of litigation in court. So how good it is Mint, I haven't got a clue. Can you put
I took a quick look at Mint, and it didn't strike me it was going to do what I do.
Well, it's not a surprise, and there are
wasn't surprised.
There's packages, but they probably don't make a Linux version. And I don't know if somebody made a Linux version of something like Quicken or not. But if you have a Linux distro, you can run wine with bottles as an example, put the Windows version of like Mint or some other similar application onto the Linux box and run the program on Linux as though it were on a Windows machine.
So that might work with the Mint bookkeeper, but it's probably not going to work on Quicken.
Well, Mint is supposed to be like the Quicken, not as a replacement for QuickBooks.
Yeah, I don't want. I've used QuickBooks in the past, And I'm not doing those kinds of things. I don't need QuickBooks.
Right. I understand that. But Mint, my understanding is supposed to be trying to be the surrogate for the defunct Quicken. And there may be a few other competing products. I just don't happen to know about them because it's not my cup of tea. Bob?
Quicken still works good on my computer, on my Windows computer.
I have heard mention of GNU Cache on Linux. It is a Linux program. Seems to be similar to Microsoft Money.
What was the name again?
GNU Cache. GNU, all caps, Cache.
Okay.
Okay.
You might look into that.
That's worth looking at. What the hell? It's not my cup of tea, but who cares? We're all trying to get various things accomplished on our computers. We're not all doing the same thing. Otherwise, we might all look the same, sound the same, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we just have to live with everybody looking identical. Good luck.
Good luck.
There was some kind of movie that was kind of the theme, and people were going wacky on the picture and that because there's no individuality. Anybody got anything else?
Thanks again.
Is anybody got any ideas for doing a presentation? Please contact me what your idea is, and I may ask for some details because I got to figure out timeline as to what's going on.
Okay.
Okay, everybody's eager. Okay. If there's nothing else, then we're a little bit over time anyhow. I'll end the meeting, and hopefully I'll see you guys next month. APCUG is not going to have a Linux work group in August, if I remember correctly, because they're having a safari. All right. Have a good night. I hope I got something out of it.